Saipan, a tropical paradise. But here, in the summer of 1944, a fierce and decisive battle of World War II was fought. On this small, rugged island, an island called Saipan. After World War I, Japan was given several former German territories, including Saipan. The empire eventually converted Saipan into a thriving agricultural colony. Despite Japan's international success, its leadership felt restricted by a lack of natural resources on the home island and space for its growing population. Through a series of extremely brutal campaigns, Japan invaded its neighbors for resources. In protest to these invasions, the United States embargoed scrap metal and crude oil, forcing Japan to look further south for fuel and materials. To get fuel and materials to the Japanese mainland, they would need to pass through the trade route of the U.S.-controlled Philippines. In order for this Japanese plan to work, Japan would need to stall the American Navy at Pearl Harbor, the hub of American might in the Pacific. December 7th, 1941, Japan launches a surprise attack. America's fleet is wounded and sunk to the shallows of Pearl Harbor. Hours later, with a weakened military presence, Japan attacked the Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, and many others, kicking off a prolonged invasion into the South Pacific. The United States declares war against Japan. American aircraft carriers were thrust into the Pacific, and eventually battleships were resurrected from the bottom of Pearl Harbor. At home, factory production accelerated.
More tanks, more guns, more shells.
All to gain control of a string of islands leading to mainland Japan. After 2 years of grinding toward Japan, Americans finally reached the Mariana Islands, Guam, Tinian, and Saipan. American strategists knew Saipan was different. They wanted to use B-29 bombers to strike Japan from the air, but the fuel tanks on these planes gave them a limited range of 1,500 miles. Saipan was within range and also had terrain suitable for runways. If the island could be captured, American forces could strike the Japanese mainland at will. The only obstacle? 30,000 Japanese troops entrenched at Saipan who knew the strategic importance of the island and were determined to never let it fall. Separate from the Japanese military was the indigenous Chamorro and Carolinian population, along with thousands of Japanese, Okinawan, and Korean civilians.
Before the invasion of Saipan, it was very peaceful here. Everybody helped one another in those days.
I liked the Japanese before the war because they treated us like people. But as the war got close, their attitude changed.
After what happened to my father, I became afraid of the Japanese soldiers.
Nothing could prepare the people of Saipan for the battle-hardened American fleet coming from across the Pacific. For over 4 days, multiple waves of aerial attacks were hoped to break Japanese defenses carved into the limestone. 2 days later, naval gunners took over, the lives of men who would invade 3 days from now hanging in the balance.
On the success of this barrage depended the fate of our Marine divisions.
The morning of June 15, 1944, it began. Troops of the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions piled into amphibious vehicles to assault a 4-mile beach under a barrage of Japanese mortar and artillery fire. The fighting was bloody and many Marines died on the beaches. In minutes, 8,000 Marines dug into the beach, and by late afternoon, the total was 20,000. Japanese troops fought so fiercely that it took the Americans 3 days to reach the first day's objective. Through a coordinated attack with the 27th Infantry Division, Americans captured Aslito Airfield, a runway that could be lengthened for American bombers. Japan needed to stop the invasion and sent a powerful fleet of ships from the west. The American Navy was ready to intercept. Over 400 Japanese planes were shot down in the largest air battle of the entire war. The Japanese plan to stop the American invasion had failed. Knowing they had cut off Japan's naval support, Americans pushed forward, capturing thousands of civilians and moving them into prison camps.
When the Americans captured us, they treated our wounds on the spot.
They gave us water, and when I saw one of them had a rosary around his neck, we figured they were good guys.
U.S. forces were taking the island, and the capital city of Garapan was finally within reach.
After 4 days of this struggle, on the 2nd of July, Garapan fell.
After losing the capital city of Garapan, Japanese troops were pushed to the northern tip of Saipan, with only cliffs at their back. That night, Japanese soldiers, desperate and with few options, ran with knives, bayonets, grenades, and spears in a final all-out banzai charge to the death. Even the wounded charged into the Americans. Eventually, the artillerymen of the 10th Marines turned back the tide. The banzai charge had failed. After the banzai attack, the battle for Saipan ended. On July 9, 1944, American commanders declared the island secure, then honored those Americans who died during the fighting. Marines were shocked by the tragedy that followed. Saipan was the first island captured with a large civilian population. Before the battle, Japanese authorities spread false propaganda about the Americans.
A Korean read a Japanese leaflet that said the Americans were going to kill all the men and take the women and children to the ships.
American interpreters and captured Japanese soldiers who became interpreters tried to intervene, but watched helplessly as men, women, and even children hurled themselves off Saipan's 800-foot cliffs. Hundreds perished. The 25-day battle for Saipan resulted in heavy civilian casualties and was one of the costliest conflicts of the war. After the conflict, the island-hopping campaign turned toward Saipan's neighboring islands, Tinian and Guam, which were captured the next month. Now, the Mariana Islands were in American hands. Using the new runways on Tinian, Guam, and Saipan, American B-29s were able to strike Japan. For the next 13 months, these superfortress bombers attacked with a grueling firebombing campaign. As the bombings continued, it became clear that Japan may never surrender. Strategists had seen the fierce Japanese resistance during the battle for Saipan and knew 1 million Americans could perish in a beach assault of the Japanese home islands. The United States was out of traditional options. August 6, 1945. The United States implemented a new plan. A B-29, the Enola Gay, took off from Saipan's neighboring island, Tinian. Its destination, Hiroshima. It dropped the first atomic bomb, marking the beginning of the end of the war in the Pacific. Today, the tropical landscape of Saipan is peaceful. But the island will never forget those young Americans who fought a strong and determined enemy on its shores. It's here that we remember the sacrifices of fighting men and women, and Chamorro and Carolinian civilians caught between two warring nations on an island called Saipan.